welcome back to Westminster. Yes, government to attempt to push once again to win the backing of MPs for Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. Unclear, though, whether the Speaker, John Bercow, will allow the plan to be voted on again. Joined now by Alice Lilly, who is a senior researcher from the non-partisan think tank, the Institute for Government. Alice, thanks so much for joining us. How do you read the situation this lunchtime?
The moment, it's certainly not clear that the Speaker will let this vote go ahead. I think the general speculation is that he won't, but we will have to wait and see. Question for the government is, what do they do then? We know that they are planning on introducing the withdrawal agreement bill today. That's the legislation that will put its new deal into law. MPs won't start debating that until tomorrow, and as that legislation passes through Parliament, there are going to be lots of amendments, lots of votes. It's still ultimately incredibly unclear how this all plays out.
And just because we can sometimes be confounded and surprised by events taking a course other than what, the group speculation is that they will take, if the Speaker surprises everybody by allowing a meaningful vote this afternoon, the government's saying it's confident it does have the numbers. Do you feel that that's an accurate assessment?
It's certainly possible. The big question, though, will be whether MPs try and amend this meaningful vote motion again, because there is some concern among them that if the government were to pass this motion, it could then now turn around to the EU and say, we don't need the extension we requested after all. So if they do try and amend this motion and the Speaker accepts those amendments, the government has said that it will actually just pull the vote. So it's still really all to play for.
So that's what it said about that. Now, going back to what you said, the big chunky withdrawal agreement bill and all the amendments that people might try to hang on that, because there's a lot of speculation about the variety of amendments. What will the government do if the opposition succeed in getting any of those through?
Government has suggested this morning that if amendments to that bill are successful, that fundamentally, in the government's eyes, constrain their ability to actually get this deal ratified with the EU, they may then seek to essentially stop that bill's progress through Parliament, and at that point try and call again for an early election. Obviously, the question then becomes, will the opposition back this time?
Yes, and just on the extension issue, we were just hearing a moment ago from Joanna was breaking the news from Edinburgh that the courts decided to delay their forming any decision on whether it was unlawful or lawful for Boris Johnson to fail to sign that letter to Brussels. I mean, Brussels obviously said they are considering the extension. So does the legality, as decided by Edinburgh, doesn't even matter at this point?
I think really the key thing here, we will obviously have to wait and see what the court says, but as you say, it's the fact that the EU, as things stand, are treating this as an extension request. They are starting to consider it, and they are probably, much like everyone else, going to want to wait and see what happens in Parliament this week before they make any real decision.
And so as you look ahead over the players and the possible plays over the course of the week, do you think at this point that we are heading for exit on the 31st of October or heading more towards extension and general election in November?
It's still absolutely possible we could leave with a deal on the 31st of October if the government is able to hold this vote today and pass it and get the withdrawal agreement through by then. The problem is that that's only 10 days. That is not a lot of time. The number of amendments, the number of votes that will happen on this bill do mean that it's an incredibly challenging time frame. So on that basis, we could well be looking at an extension.
And when we're talking about the challenges of the time frame, we haven't really talked about any challenges from the House of Lords yet. We've been focusing on the Commons, but of course the Lords has to pass it too.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that the government can essentially timetable legislation through the Commons. It can set out something called a programme motion it will do tomorrow, where it essentially says this is how long you will have to debate it. Now, MPs might vote that down, which will obviously cause an issue for the government. In the House of Lords, there's no such equivalent procedure. Things take as long as they take. So certainly to get this through, the suggestion is that we would be looking at lots of very long days in Parliament and possibly more weekend sittings.
And of course the Lords don't have to consider the electoral arithmetic, but all MPs who are, in the building behind us over the course of this week, they have to expect that at some point they're going to have to, sooner or later and possibly sooner, going to face their electorates. And that argument from the government, this is a Parliament delay, get Brexit done, those lines must be at the back of their mind too.
I'm sure, and this is the government really trying to, I think, put pressure on MPs to say you've got to take this deal, people want to get this done. At the same time, MPs will want to balance that with ensuring that this withdrawal agreement bill, which is a bill of real significance, gets the kind of scrutiny and consideration it deserves. But yes, absolutely, an election is never far from anyone's mind at the moment.
And then, obviously, the other thing that we haven't really talked about yet is Yellowhammer preparation. We are literally 10 days away from what the government still says is its determination to exit the EU. So that no deal planning is being ramped up.
And again, I think this is a move really government to try and put pressure on MPs. It wants MPs to really think that it's either this deal or no deal. The government will be making a statement, I believe, in the Commons this afternoon about the progress of Yellowhammer, but really I think it all comes down to the politics in Parliament the next few days.
Alice, thank you so much for that analysis.